All right, well, let's jump into it. I feel like as soon as we ended Covfefe break on Friday, there was a lot that happened, Carrie. And I think one of the most gratifying things, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, there was an executive order that I liked. Or I don't know if it's technically an executive order, a memorandum. And
This is huge.
I think it's a big, big deal. We can talk about why it's a big deal, but let's want to just look at it for a sec here.
Yeah. So on Friday, Trump issued this executive action, and I forget the name of the guy who actually wrote the letter.
Russell Vought, director. It
Russell
looks like
Vought.
the OMB director or director. Yeah, director of maybe Office of Management and Budget. I'm not sure, but that's what it looks like.
And first of all, this is in direct relation to the efforts of Casey Peterson and Christopher Rufo. Christopher Rufo had just been on the news, I think the day before, um, basically calling out the president, saying, "Would you please do something about federal funds, about taxpayer dollars going to fund these indoctrination seminars at government centers like Sandia Labs?" And he did it. This came out on September 4th.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 days after he went on the news and called for this. So let's read through
Yep.
it. Carter, do you want to read it?
Yeah. I don't know. Should we read all of it? I mean, we
I
can.
want to read it.
All
Yeah.
right. It's only a page and a paragraph. So, subject is training in the federal government. It has come to the president's attention that executive branch agencies have spent millions of taxpayer dollars to date, quote, training government workers to believe divisive anti-American propaganda. Well, that's a good start. That is true. And I'm glad that
It's a
they're
great start.
characterizing it appropriately. For example, according to press reports, employees across the executive branch have been required to attend trainings where they are told that, quote, virtually all white people contribute to racism, or where they are required to say that they, quote, benefit from racism. According to press reports, in some cases, these trainings have further claimed that there is racism embedded in the belief that America is the land of opportunity, or the belief that the most qualified person should receive a job. Okay, so what I love about this is they're getting right to some of the most outrageous claims of critical race theory, and they're completely correct in terms of their
And I
characterization.
love that they're actually using real excerpts and they're quoting some of the things that are being taught. They're not just paraphrasing. They're giving you actual quotes that are pushed in these seminars.
That's right. These types of, quote, trainings not only run counter to the fundamental beliefs for which our nation has stood since its inception, but they also engender division and resentment within the federal workforce. By the way, this is really well written. This is really well written. We can be proud that as an employer, the federal government has employees of all races, ethnicities, and religions. We can be proud that Americans from all over the country seek to join our workforce and dedicate themselves to public service. We can be proud of our continued efforts to welcome all individuals who seek to serve their fellow Americans as federal employees. However, we cannot accept our employees receiving training that seeks to undercut our core values as Americans and drive division within our workforce. So I highlighted some of my favorite parts down here, which we'll get to. All right. The president has directed me, so this is Russell writing this, the president has directed me to ensure that federal agencies cease and desist from using taxpayer dollars to fund these divisive, un American propaganda training sessions. Accordingly, to that end, the Office of Management and Budget will shortly issue more detailed guidance on implementing the president's directive. In the meantime, this is the part I love because they use all of the right language. They're going to use all of the critical race theory woke language, and I think for a lot of people, this might be the first time they're seeing this stuff. So, in the meantime, all agencies are
Yes,
directed to
this
be.
is,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
I can't contain my joy that someone is finally,
Yes.
someone with power in the situation is finally calling this out and speaking about what this is and labeling it as accurately as un-American. So,
Yes.
okay, let's
Yes.
continue.
And look, this is probably the best thing I've seen the government do in a really long time, other than all the moments that they don't go to war with someone, which we can't really count because we don't know when they decide to not go to war. Okay. In the meantime, all agencies are directed to begin to identify all contracts or other agency spending related to any training on, and they put this in quotes, critical race theory, white privilege, or any other training or propaganda effort that teaches or suggests either one, that the United States is an inherently racist or evil country, or two, that any race or ethnicity is inherently racist or evil. By the way, I believe if these standards were applied to the Department of Education, it would eradicate 1619 from all public schools immediately.
Oh, absolutely. And that, I think, well, we can get into next steps later, but continue.
Yep. In addition, all agencies should begin to identify all available avenues from within the law to cancel any such contracts and or divert federal dollars away from these un-American propaganda training sessions. The President and his administration are fully committed to the fair and equal treatment of all individuals in the United States. The President has a proven track record of standing for those whose voice has long been ignored and who have failed to benefit from all our country has to offer, and he intends to continue to support all Americans regardless of race, religion, or creed. The divisive, false, and demeaning propaganda of the critical race theory movement is contrary to all we stand for as Americans and should have no place in the federal government. Hear, hear, absolutely. I find it hard to believe that I'm actually applauding something the government has done, but I will applaud that. That is well written. It is spot on, and it's the right thing to do. And as Casey Peterson brought up in our interview, I think there might be downstream effects of this as larger corporations will have a harder time justifying the legitimacy of what they're doing because people will be able to point to the federal government and say, well, they're not allowed to do this.
Yes.
This is recognized as racist.
Yeah, so two things about next steps. I think one, if they are successful and if this is enough to root it out of public or federally funded agencies or from the Sandia Labs, if it's enough to get it out of the government, then I think the next steps would be, as you mentioned, schools, which are publicly funded as well.
Yes.
So imagine if they had to do the same thing and remove critical race theory and remove any type of identity politics-based Marxism from public schools. I think that's the next step. And then if you're able to do that,
go ahead.
Yeah, Casey Peterson, if you guys haven't seen it yet, we were fortunate we were able to interview Casey Peterson last week, and you can watch that interview on our channel, and he's just amazing. I think he's a modern day hero, but one of the things he said, which you're alluding to, Carter, is that if you're able to cut it out of the government, and rightly so because it is discriminatory and racist and it's morally wrong, then you necessarily shift the Overton window over what's considered acceptable. And so it will have, I do think you're right that it will have a downstream effect culturally at private institutions. It would be harder for them to continue to do this because what is considered acceptable to do will have shrunk.
Yes. Yeah. And imagine this. So I mentioned getting it out of education. Great. Also, you could theoretically say, as the federal government, because this is how the federal government has done a lot of bad things in the past. They've held federal funding over states' heads. So they collect taxes and then withhold funding back to the states. You could easily say any state that can't use any federal funding to do anything related to this. If you're doing this in your state, we're not going to fund you federally. So good luck. You're on your own for roads and schools and everything else. If you want to do critical race theory, you're on your own. I think that would be great. So someone just said, I'm sipping on water with no ice and I'm a monster. It's so hot here. I had ice and it melted already. So there you go. And who says it's water? Right. Well, I do appear drunk all the time. So I think that's great. I think I love it. I think it's. Can I just say one thing?
Okay,
Go ahead.
Yeah, and then I have something.
It vindicates me. I have been saying you got to vote for someone who actually stands up to social justice, who actually stands up to critical race theory. You can't have this grandiose plan that things can get better by singing Kumbaya and voting Unity Party or something or voting for Joe Jorgensen, who's, quote, libertarian, but which I'm putting in quotes intentionally, but totally endorsed critical race theory, at least tacitly, if not explicitly. I don't know that she's explicitly endorsed it, but she's not fighting it. This is a cultural war. And the biggest threat, I think, intellectually, our biggest threat here is the authoritarian left. So show me another candidate who is actively fighting the authoritarian left, and I will consider voting for them. But come on. I don't even like a lot about Trump, but There is no contest here. He is the only one fighting the battle that needs to be fought. He's literally the only one.
You and I were talking about this privately yesterday or the day before, and you were saying to me, I don't understand why there's no other, even a third party candidate who realized that even if they were doing it inauthentically, but realized that they could get votes by opposing it, but no one's doing it. No one else is opposing it. I would have expected the libertarians to do it.
Me too. I would have thought that libertarians would be like, hey, we'll oppose critical race theory, but here's someone who's not bombastic and you like better than Trump, but we'll fight the culture war for you. That would have been a good inroads, but no.
Plus, I know he's going to win votes with this because I had decided a month or so ago that I'm voting for him, but there are still some liberals and progressives I know who were like, I don't know, maybe I won't vote. And one of our friends, Carter, who wrote to us and said, this seals the deal. I guess I'm voting for him. You have to. He's the only one who's pushing back against this. Okay, so I wanted to talk about what we can expect from the people who push, from the cultural gatekeepers, the elite, the people who push social justice ideology.
Like what are they going to do in response to this, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Cool. So what they're going to do next is, this is kind of like after he gave the speech that I liked, where he first started to talk about some of this stuff at the, why do I always blank on the name of this national attraction?
Mount Rushmore?
Mount Rushmore. Yeah.
I only know it now because it's the one that you always forget. So that's what
It's the one I always forget. Okay, so after the Mount Rushmore speech, I think you'll remember I said to you, I'm really happy that he's calling it by name because it is a form of Marxism. But at the same time, I said it sort of sucks because now people are going to say, oh, well, that's just a Trump talking point, whatever. And so they're definitely going to do that with this. There are people who are going to say, so now when all of you who are watching, when you start to push back against this in your everyday life with people that you know, if you start to call it what it is, which is a mutated form of Marxism based around identity rather than around class and wealth, based around identity and power, when you start to talk about that, they're going to say, oh, that's just an alt-right. They're going to call it alt-right. They're going to call it white nationalist. They're going to call it Trump. They're going to try and smear this very accurate criticism just by its association with him. But I don't think they're going to be very successful in the long term, because I think it's a better thing if you're looking at the net positive and the net negative. I think that it's more of a positive to have the federal government speaking against it and trying to root it out at the federal level than any negative effects of the criticism being associated with him.
Oh, yeah, because it's not the federal government speaking out against it. It's just Trump's administration, right? I mean, he claimed, his whole claim was, I'm going to go drain the swamp. And a lot of people have been frustrated at the pace with which the swamp seems to be draining. But this is a real tangible drain the swamp moment, right? The swamp is these bureaucracies that are unaccountable and have agendas that are often explicitly anti-American agendas that are pushing their crap. So this is a perfect drain the swamp moment, and I think the public is already. I think they've already caught on. Maybe I'm giving the public too much credit, but I think they've already caught on to the mainstream media's and the Democrats' knee-jerk reaction to just calling everything Russian bots and everything like, oh, this is just a Trump talking point, Orange Man bad, blah, blah, blah. I think people are used to it. So if all they have to go back to is, yeah, but Orange Man bad, you're just repeating Orange Man stuff, I don't think that helps them. I mean, it will embolden people who are already indoctrinated and already going to go pull the donkey lever, but it's not gonna convince regular people. I don't think there's regular people that are like, I was on the fence, but since you said Orange Man bad, that's a new argument I haven't heard before. So like, they're just going to be like, right. Oh, you have really no arguments against this. Basically, you're just trying to say it's bad because Trump did it. I'm sick of hearing that. I'm tired of it. And this stuff sounds horrible and racist. And at least this guy is, you're defending it. So,
so I have another, just a prediction of what's going to happen. So again, they're going to try and make so they're very concerned with language, and they're very concerned with controlling language. And because if you control language, you control thought, you control people. And when I first started waking up to what my old ideology was, and I was searching for a name for it because it calls itself social justice, but I was starting to recognize the Marxist roots. And I remember in my first essay about leaving the social justice cult, I referred to it as cultural Marxism. And I was told, oh no, that's only alt-right people use that phrase. It's an alt-right talking point, don't use. And basically it was a term that they had successfully made somewhat off limits. So they could smear you if you called it cultural Marxism. Well, over time, I started to realize that wasn't even the best way I could describe it. It's more identitarian Marxism is what I would call it. So I don't feel any attachment to that term. But they're going to do the same thing. They're going to try to do the same thing to terms like identitarian Marxism. Anything that is successful in pointing out what it is, they're going to try and make off limits socially, culturally, so that you feel bad using it. Don't let them do that to you. And what I like to do is I always point out to people, I don't have an attachment to any of these terms other than as a way to accurately describe what it is I'm talking about. So, for example, people will say SJW, social justice warrior. They say that's a pejorative. It's like, not really. I'm not. You just don't like it because I'm criticizing it. But I could call it anything else. If you prefer for me to call it, identitarian leftism, or give me whatever term you want. If you want me just to call it social justice, I'll call it that. The point is, what I'm saying about it is critical. So you don't like it because it's criticism. Yeah.
What are they going to do with the problem here? Is he named critical race theory explicitly? So can they distance themselves from the thing they've been talking about for 2 decades? Like, I don't know.
What do you mean?
Well, I guess just like social justice warrior, they coined the term social justice warrior to describe themselves, and now it's a pejorative, right? Quote, now it's a pejorative, right? Because it accurately describes them. Well, he's calling out critical race theory. Are they going to now say critical race theory is that's just a phrase that the alt-right uses? I don't know how they can get away with that. They have books and lots of stuff about critical race theory.
No, they're going to defend that term.
Okay.
What they're going to do is they're going to attack any characterization of it as a form of Marxism.
Okay.
That's what I think.
And they'll say that the dumbed, unschooled Trump voters don't get critical race theory. That's not what it's about. It's about anti-racism.
Right. They've already started saying that. They've already started saying that the critics are alt-right, which is not true. Look at the loudest critics and the ones who have been the most successful at pushing back against it. James Lindsay, Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein. I'm a former social justice warrior. These people are not on the right.